Welcome to the Dark Ozarks. We are discussing the dark history of the Ouachitas and the Ozarks connections there. But first, we want to remind you that the Dark Ozarks podcast is now available on Branson Podcast Network, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, or about any other podcast platform. So many people may be wondering why we're discussing an area outside of the Ozarks proper. Why are we talking about spaces outside of the geographical lines of the Ozarks?
Well, maybe the Ozarks are a state of mind, but seriously, there is a lot more that goes into a region than just geology, particularly when people and culture are involved. The lines and borders are a bit more fuzzy, but the connections and the influences are very significant.
We will return to the Ouachitas and the Ozarks, but first we want to invite you to like, follow, and subscribe to Dark Ozarks on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, as well as your favorite podcast platform. We also invite you to become a Dark Ozarks subscriber on Facebook. On the Dark Ozarks Facebook page, click subscribe, have your login information ready, and join Dark Ozarks behind the scenes for only $4.99 per month.
Your $4.99 per month subscription allows you to come with us on paranormal investigations, deep dive research, and topics too controversial for public view. The next 100 subscribers will be entered in a drawing for a free Dark Ozarks t-shirt and an exclusive signed first drawing copy of the book Dark Ozarks, The Spooklight. Subscribe today to be entered in the drawing.
And now you can get Dark Ozarks t-shirts for sale at darkozarks.com and paranormalsciencelab.com.
We encourage you to check out Always Buying Books in Joplin, Missouri, in person and online, on Facebook and at the website alwaysbuyingbooks.com for all of your reading needs, including a large section on the paranormal, history, and more. Not to mention, the building is haunted. Tell Bob and Elise that we sent you.
We also want to thank Beard Engine Brewing Company in Alba, Missouri. Beard Engine Brewing is the only English-style brewery in Missouri and has been twice named Missouri's best brewery by the Missouri Brewers Association. Great beer and great food in a historical building with a noir past. And yes, their building is also haunted. Tell Nate and Tiff that we sent you.
So outside of the geographical and geological boundaries of the Ozarks, in the case of going outside to our southwest and south, you get to the Ouachita Mountains.
Yes, lots of mountains, forest, monsters, ghost stories, gamblers, and murder.
Mm-hmm. It's a fascinating region. It is a beautiful region. And culturally, it is essentially cultural first cousin to the Ozarks.
It is. And there's a lot of connections back and forth that have affected both regions, and understanding that border region helps us understand how we got to where we are in the Ozarks.
It does, and I found it particularly interesting. The Ouachitas with the Ozark Plateau form the United States interior highlands. Those two together create the interior highlands, and they are, quite frankly, they tend to stand out. The further south that you get, both in the Ozarks and then down to the Ouachitas, the more dramatically evident the interior highlands are to the passerby, to the casual traveler, than coming into the Ozarks from the north, predominantly into Missouri.
That's true, because we're the northern end of the Ozarks, where you and I both are. We're a plateau. And so we're already on top of the plateau, and you don't recognize it as readily, and if you're not aware of it.
It's really learning to look for the cues, and it surprises people, again, just going off onto some of the geography of the Ozarks, but it surprises people when they realize that you're moving into the Ozarks as far north as Jefferson City or Sedalia.
Very true. It's a large area that people don't recognize, but we get to talk about monsters right now.
We do. And one of our favorite monsters is actually quite well known. It's the Boggy Creek Monster, or the Fouke Monster. And we're now talking about the area, the wild spaces in the around Texarkana, Arkansas, which is right at the state lines of Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas, and in a transitional space just to the southwest of the Ouachita mountain range.
Yes, but there's similar tales of Bigfoot or other large cryptids throughout the Ouachitas and the Ozarks, but the Fouke Monster is particularly renowned, and in part to a native of the area, Charles Pierce.
and Charles B. Pierce had a really interesting life, and I believe was originally from Illinois, but spent a great deal of his career in in Arkansas, and was a very unique filmmaker who created films that had an unusual impact upon the psyche of Americans in ways that larger blockbuster films have not. And one of his best known films, these were typically comparatively low budget, if not low budget films, was The Legend of Boggy Creek.
Yes, and you can't really speak about Bigfoot lore without some references, or at least the popular conception of Bigfoot that really came out of that movie. We've talked about how media has affected our perception of ghosts and the paranormal. Well, Charles B. Pierce really had that kind of effect on Bigfoot creatures.
That is very fair. And the Legend of Boggy Creek and then Legend of Boggy Creek 2 are fun films. And we did a screening of Legend of Boggy Creek at the Coleman Theater in Miami, Oklahoma.
Yes, we did.
That was a lot of fun. What I find really interesting as a personal point of intersection is Legend of Boggy Creek 2 is actually one of my favorite movies that has been featured on Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Yes, it has. It is also the movie that Charles himself said he wished he'd not done.
Oh, which is fair.
Yeah.
It is fair, but the films, and I'm going to talk about Legend of Boggy Creek, the first film, for an indie film or a low budget film produced in this case in the 70s, the film holds up surprisingly well.
It really does. And it creates such an atmosphere that goes beyond the budget of the movie. But what I find really interesting is not only is it a cinematic piece, but it's not just fiction. These tales in the area started in the late 1800s, and there have been sightings off and on up into the last couple of years. So it's always easy to take something that is that kind of movie and say, oh, it's just a fictionalized idea about the broad subject of Bigfoot, but it was more than that.
Very much more than that. I mean, you look at recent sightings, in the Fouke, Arkansas area. We have sightings from 2018, 2017, 2016. Some of the earlier and older sightings can go back as early as 1908, range from 1908 to 1955. It is enigmatic, to say the least, and problematic for analyses when you don't have a body, when you don't have a specimen and for people who might be wondering, the Boggy Creek monster, the Fouke monster, closely resembles descriptions of a southern Bigfoot.
Yes.
That's
small bank, basically.
Yes, and it is quite reasonably appropriate in terms of the terrain. We've moved out of the mountains in that region, and we have delta space and a lot of wooded areas, a lot of wet areas. We don't have a photograph, at least a reliable one thus far, and we don't have a body, a scientific specimen. But we have a lot of very interesting reports, and I take those. Obviously, it is important to take these kind of reports with a grain of salt, but it is also important, for me anyway, to take them respectfully.
Agreed. And one thing that I always stop and think, that although Fouke is down in the Delta region, some of the reports are of the monster running across Highway 71, which of course is now I-49, which runs about 3 miles from my house. So literally I could get on the highway right here and drive straight there. This isn't something that is remote or totally removed from our existence in the Ozarks.
It is not. And many of the reports that come from the Fouke monster sightings are not dissimilar to the reports that show up across the Ozarks. Very
true. And we're going to be talking about this in more depth, and a lot more monsters, ghosts, gamblers, murders in the long format that will be uploaded tomorrow, as well as other issues that we're going to be talking about. So we invite you to come back tomorrow for that. And in the meantime, don't forget to check out upcoming events and merchandise at darkozarks.com and paranormalsciencelab.com. Thank you again to Always Buying Books and Bearded and Brewing Company for helping to bring the Dark Ozarks to everyone.
And on the next episode, we are going to be discussing Lake of the Ozarks and some of the dark history associated with one of the most well-known lakes in Missouri. Catch the Dark Ozarks podcast on Branson Podcast Network, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, or about any other podcast platform. Thank you, everyone. And remember, there are no easy answers in the Dark Ozarks.